When I was around 12 years old, I lived in a small town with my mom and younger sister. Our house was on the edge of town, next to a dense forest. We loved the peace and quiet, but it also meant that it could get pretty lonely and eerie at night. One weekend, my mom had to go on a business trip and left me in charge. She trusted me because I was responsible and knew how to take care of my sister. It was a typical Saturday evening. My sister and I had just finished watching a movie and she had gone to bed. I stayed up a little longer to read a book. It was around midnight when I heard a strange noise coming from outside. It sounded like someone was dragging something heavy across the ground. I brushed it off, thinking it was just an animal or my imagination playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again. This time it was louder and closer. I decided to take a look, so I grabbed a flashlight and went to the living room window. I shined the light outside but couldn't see anything unusual. The noise had stopped, so I figured it was nothing and went back to my book. Not even 10 minutes later, I heard a loud thud on our front porch. My heart started pounding. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I tiptoed to the front door and peered through the peephole. At first, I couldn't see anything. But then I noticed a shadow moving on the other side of the door. I froze, not knowing what to do. I didn't want to wake my sister and scare her, but I also didn't want to open the door. I decided to call my mom, hoping she could tell me what to do. She didn't answer, so I left a voicemail, trying to stay as calm as possible. I went back to the living room, keeping the front door in my line of sight. I kept the flashlight off to avoid drawing attention. Then, I heard the doorknob turn. Someone was trying to get in. I felt a chill run down my spine. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, which happened to be a heavy book, and stood ready. The doorknob stopped turning, and for a moment, everything was quiet again. I started to think that maybe they had given up. But then, I heard a tapping on the window. I turned slowly, my flashlight now pointing towards the sound. A face was pressed against the glass, staring right at me. It was an older man with wild hair and a crazed look in his eyes. I screamed and dropped the flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. The tapping turned into banging as the man started hitting the window harder. I ran to my sister's room and locked the door behind me. I woke her up and told her to stay quiet. We hid in the closet, clutching each other, terrified. I called 911 and whispered what was happening. The operator assured me that help was on the way and told me to stay hidden. We could hear the man moving around outside, trying to find another way in. It felt like an eternity, but finally we saw the red and blue lights flashing outside. The police had arrived. There were shouts and a struggle, then silence. A police officer knocked on our door and called out, saying it was safe to come out. I opened the door cautiously and saw two officers standing there. They told us that they had caught the man. He was a drifter who had been seen around town acting strangely. We were safe now. My mom came home the next day, and I told her everything. She hugged us tightly, apologizing for not being there. That night we all slept in the same room, still shaken from the experience. Even now, years later, I sometimes think about that night and what could have happened. It was the most terrifying experience of my life, and I always make sure to double check that all the doors and windows are locked before going to bed.